April 14, 1941. The Mediterranean stretched black and endless above us, pressing down with the weight of 200 feet of salt water. Inside HMS Upholder, the air tasted like diesel, sweat, and metal. I pressed my palm against the hull, feeling the subtle vibration of our electric motors humming through the steel. Cold. Always cold down here, even when the Med was cooking the surface into a shimmering mirror. Depth holding at 200 feet, sir, Petty Officer Crawford reported, his Yorkshire accent cutting through the mechanical drone that had become our constant companion. His face gleamed with condensation in the dim red emergency lighting we ran on during silent running. Every man aboard knew the rules. Speak in whispers, walk in socks, breathe quietly. Out there, Italian destroyers prowled with hydrophones that could pick up a dropped wrench from a mile away. I was Lieutenant Commander David Wanklin, 29 years old, commanding officer of one of His Majesty's submarines operating out of Malta. We'd been down here for 16 hours, stalking a convoy we'd picked up at dawn. My legs ached from standing watch, but sitting wasn't an option. Not when every second counted. Not when 31 men depended on the decisions I made in the next few minutes. The control room smelled like unwashed bodies and yesterday's tinned beef. Johnson, our youngest rating barely 18, stood at the diving planes with white knuckles wrapped around the controls. This was his third patrol. He still flinched every time the hull groaned under pressure. The older hands had learned to trust the rivets, the welds, the quarter-inch steel plate that separated us from drowning. I'd learned something different. Never trust anything completely. Not the steel. Not the charts. Not even your own instincts when they'd been ground down by exhaustion. Hydrophone contact bearing 035, sir. That was Harris, our sound operator, pressed against his headset like a man trying to hear God whisper. Twin screws. Destroyer class. Range approximately 4,000 yards and closing. 4,000 yards. Close enough to matter. Far enough to plan. I moved to the plot table where Lieutenant Drummond had been tracking our position since we'd submerged before dawn. The chart showed the narrow channel between Sicily and the North African coast, a choke point where Axis convoys had to pass if they wanted to supply Rommel's Africa Corps. Malta sat like a dagger pointed at their supply lines, and we were Malta's teeth. "What's the convoy doing?" I asked, keeping my voice level, conversational. Fear spreads faster than fire in a submarine. The men needed to hear confidence, even if it was performance. "Holding course, sir," Drummond replied, his pencil making tiny marks on the chart. "The destroyers running a standard zigzag pattern, but the merchantmen are staying in line. They haven't detected us. Yet. They hadn't detected us yet." That word hung unspoken between us like smoke. I walked forward to the periscope well, my socks silent on the cork-lined deck. Every surface designed to absorb sound, every movement calculated to avoid creating noise. We were ghosts haunting these waters, and ghosts didn't make mistakes. Up periscope. Fast look. The bronze tube hissed up from its well. I caught it on the rise, pressing my eye against the rubber coupling, and the world opened up above. Dawn light sparkled on gentle swells. Too gentle. The Mediterranean could smile at you right before she drowned you. I swept the lens across the horizon, counting silhouettes against the brightening sky. 3 merchantmen, fat-bellied cargo ships sitting low in the water, probably loaded with ammunition, fuel, or vehicles bound for Tripoli. 2 destroyers. One ahead, one behind, both moving in those lazy zigzag patterns that were supposed to make them harder to hit. It also made them slower, predictable to a patient man with a calculator and a stopwatch. Down scope. The periscope slithered back into its housing with a hydraulic sigh. I closed my eyes, holding the image in my mind, running calculations. Range, speed, bearing, intercept, angle. 4 torpedoes loaded in the forward tubes, 8,000 pounds of high explosive waiting for my order. But torpedoes were currency we couldn't waste. Malta's supply situation was desperate. Every fish we fired had to count because there might not be more coming. "We'll let them pass overhead," I said, catching Drummond's questioning look. Then surface behind them after dark. We can make better speed on diesels, get ahead of them, and hit them at dawn tomorrow when they're close to their destination and feeling safe. It was aggressive, risky. It meant spending hours on the surface within range of Italian aircraft, gambling that their reconnaissance wouldn't spot our wake. But the alternative was a hasty attack now with poor geometry and a low probability of multiple hits. I'd learned long ago that patience kills more enemies than aggression. "Aye, sir," Drummond acknowledged, already marking the new position on his chart. The minutes crawled past like wounded men. The destroyer grew louder in Harris's hydrophones, the distinctive throb of its propellers filling his headset until he had to pull the speakers away from his ears to avoid damage. The merchantmen followed, their heavier, slower beats, creating a symphony of mechanical thunder that passed overhead like a freight train crossing a bridge. Then, silence, or what passed for silence underwater, the constant low roar of ocean currents and distant marine life. We'd let 4 million pounds of shipping sail past without firing a shot. Some of the younger men looked confused, disappointed even. They'd joined up to fight, not to hide in the dark like rats. "Secure from action stations," I ordered. "Rig for silent running. We'll maintain the current depth and course for 2 more hours, then surface after full dark." The crew relaxed incrementally. Men moved to their bunks or their duty stations with the fluid efficiency of a practiced routine. Someone broke out the tea urn, pouring cups of over-stewed black liquid that tasted like rust, but contained precious heat and caffeine. I accepted mine from Crawford, cupping both hands around the chipped enamel mug. "Long game, sir?" he asked quietly, understanding in his weathered face. "Always," I replied. "Always the long game." But the Mediterranean had taught me that long games could end very suddenly. And somewhere above us, beyond the steel hull and the crushing water, something was about to go very wrong. Midnight found us on the surface, diesels roaring as we carved through gentle swells at 14 knots. The night air tasted clean after 16 hours of breathing recycled atmosphere. I stood on the bridge with my lookouts, binoculars scanning the horizon while stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. No moon yet. Good. The darker the night, the safer we ran. Below, the engine room crew wrestled with the temperamental diesels that powered us forward while simultaneously charging the massive batteries that kept us alive underwater. The chief engineer, a Glaswegian named McIntyre who communicated primarily in growls and wrench throws, had warned me before we sailed that the starboard diesel was running rough. Parts were scarce. Everything was scarce in Malta. We made do with what we had and prayed it held together. Ship on the horizon, bearing 270. The lookout's cry brought my binoculars around. There, silhouetted against the star field, a low shape moved across our path. Too small for a merchantman. Wrong profile for a destroyer. My stomach tightened. Dive, dive, dive. The alarm klaxon shattered the night as I dropped through the bridge hatch, my lookouts tumbling after me. The bridge watch officer slammed the hatch closed and spun the locking wheel as water already rushed over the casing. Our bow dipped hard as the ballast tanks flooded, pulling us down in that controlled fall that always felt like the first drop on a carnival ride. "Rig for depth charges," I called, grabbing handholds as the deck angled beneath my feet. Around me, men moved with practiced efficiency, securing equipment, closing watertight doors, preparing for violence. "Contact bearing 275, Harris reported, his voice tight. "Twin screws, high speed, range 1,800 yards and closing fast." "Sir, I'm getting another contact. Single screw, diesel engine." "It's a U-boat, sir." "German." A German submarine on the surface, probably running supplies to North Africa or conducting its own patrol. We'd almost surfaced directly in front of it. Worse, it had seen us. The twin-screw contact would be its escort, probably an Italian destroyer or corvette that traveled with U-boats through these contested waters. "Level at 100 feet, I ordered. "Silent running. Rig for depth charges." The command rippled through the boat. Men secured loose items, checked valves, tightened fittings, Everything that could make noise had to be locked down. We became a held breath, a prayer whispered in steel. The first depth charge exploded somewhere above and behind us, a muffled crump that sent shock waves through the water. The hull rang like a struck bell. Light bulbs shattered, raining glass. A steam line cracked with a hissing scream before someone got a wrench on the isolation valve. In the red emergency lighting, faces looked like demons carved from shadow and blood. Another explosion. Closer. The deck heaved sideways, throwing men against bulkheads. Someone cried out, quickly stifled. I gripped the periscope housing as the submarine rolled, her steel frame groaning in protest. Cork insulation rained down from the overhead, and somewhere after I heard the tinkling crash of breaking porcelain, there went the officer's head probably. "Depth 200 feet, Crawford reported, his voice steady despite the white-knuckle grip he had on the diving station. "Holding steady. Belay that," I countered. "Take us down to 300. Slow descent. Keep the bubble centered." 300 feet was deeper than we were supposed to go. The hull was rated for 250, maybe 275, if the rivets were feeling generous. But depth was safety, distance from the killing zone, where depth charges did their worst work. Every foot we went down was a foot further from the explosions, bought at the price of increased pressure trying to crush us like a tin can under a boot heel. The deck angled down. Water rushed through the ballast tanks with a sound like distant waterfalls. Pressure squeezed the hull, making it pop and groan in protest. Johnson, at the diving planes, had gone pale as old bone, but his hands remained steady on the controls. Good lad. I made a mental note to mention him in my report if we lived to file one. 300 feet. 310. 320. Level off, I ordered. All stop on the motors. We drifted in the dark, momentum carrying us forward as the depth charge pattern continued above. The Italian destroyer was following doctrine, dropping charges in a grid pattern based on where they thought we'd gone. They couldn't hear us anymore. Not at this depth with our motors stopped and every man frozen in place. We'd become invisible, a hole in the ocean where a submarine used to be. But invisibility had a price. We were running on batteries now, and batteries didn't last forever. The air was already growing thick, carbon dioxide building up with every breath. We had maybe 6 hours before the atmosphere became toxic, less if we had to run the motors. And above us, the destroyer showed no signs of leaving. Time became elastic. Minutes stretched into hours. Men sat or stood at their stations, breathing shallowly, thinking private thoughts. Some prayed. Others stared at nothing, their minds gone somewhere else, somewhere safer. I remained at the periscope housing, listening to Harris's whispered reports on hydrophone contacts. "Destroyers moving off, sir. Bearing now 310, range opening. I think they've lost us." "How long ago?" 16 minutes, sir." 16 minutes of silence. That was good. That was promising. But it could also be a trick. Destroyers sometimes went quiet, pretending to leave, hoping the submarine would move or surface. Patient killers waiting for one betraying sound. "We'll give it another hour," I decided. "Then slow ahead, come up to 100 feet for a look." That hour aged us. The air grew heavier, harder to breathe. Someone was sick in a corner, the smell adding to the atmosphere of diesel and fear. I found myself counting heartbeats, then losing count, then starting again. The steel hull groaned and popped around us, metal fatiguing under pressure. It was never meant to sustain for this long. Finally. "Slow ahead both motors. Come up to 100 feet. Careful on the dive planes." We rose like a corpse floating from the deep. Slowly, carefully, every sound is suppressed and controlled. At 100 feet, I ordered the periscope up and took a fast look around. Empty ocean. Dawnlight painting the swells in shades of rose and gold. No destroyers, no U-boats, nothing but water and sky and the distant line of the Sicilian coast. "Surface the boat. Lookouts to the bridge. Let's get some air in here before we all pass out." The submarine broached like a whale, water streaming off her casing as the diesel engines roared to life. Fresh air poured down the conning tower hatch, sweet as wine, clean as prayer. Men gasped and coughed, filling lungs that had been rationing oxygen for too long. I climbed to the bridge and stood in the dawn, feeling the sun on my face, watching the horizon for threats that might still be hunting us. We'd escaped. But the convoy was gone, vanished somewhere toward Tripoli. The night that was supposed to position us for an attack had instead become a struggle for survival, and we still had to get home to Malta, through waters that grew more dangerous every day. "Set course for Malta," I ordered. "Best speed. Let's get home while we still can." But the Mediterranean wasn't finished with us yet. By noon, the starboard diesel was dying. McIntyre emerged from the engine room covered in oil and swearing in creative combinations of Glaswegian and maritime profanity that would have impressed a longshoreman. "She's done, sir," he reported, wiping black hands on an equally black rag. "Main bearing seized. We can limp along on one engine, maybe 8 knots if we're gentle, but if we push her, the whole thing, I'll seize up solid." 8 knots. Barely faster than a man could walk. Malta lay 200 miles southeast, through waters increasingly thick with Axis aircraft and surface vessels. At 8 knots, we'd need 24 hours to reach safety. 24 hours of exposure, unable to dive quickly if we ran into trouble because the working diesel needed time to shut down and switch over to electric motors. "Do what you can, Chief," I told him, which was code for, "There's nothing to be done but pray and improvise," the unofficial motto of the Malta submarine flotilla. The afternoon crawled past. We ran on the surface, taking advantage of speed while we had it, knowing we were vulnerable but having no choice. The lookouts scanned every degree of horizon, binoculars sweeping back and forth in overlapping arcs. Aircraft were the greatest danger. A plane could spot us from miles away, report our position, and we'd have destroyers converging from every direction. At 1400 hours, we got our first scare. A reconnaissance plane, Italian by the engine note, passed overhead at high altitude. We crash-dived immediately, the working diesel screaming in protest as it tried to maintain power while we flooded ballast tanks. The boat took a steep angle, men grabbing handholds, equipment shifting and clanging despite everything being secured. We stayed down for 2 hours while the plane circled above. Through the periscope, I watched it make lazy circles, searching the empty ocean where we'd been. Has the pilot seen our dive? Was he radioing coordinates to surface vessels? Or had we gotten down fast enough, disappeared before he registered our presence? Finally, the plane departed. We surfaced again, the remaining diesel coughing back to life, and continued our crawl toward Malta. Evening brought new problems. The batteries, drained by our time at 300 feet, and the evasive diving, needed charging. But we couldn't run the diesel hard enough to both charge batteries and make decent speed. McIntyre gave me the choice. Arrive in Malta tomorrow morning with full batteries, or arrive tonight with empty ones. Tonight, I decided, we need to get behind Malta's fighter cover before daylight. We'll worry about batteries after we're safe. If we got safe. That remained to be seen. The night was absolute. No moon, thick clouds obscuring even the stars. We moved through darkness like a blind man feeling his way through a familiar room, navigation by dead reckoning and prayer. The ancient fortifications of Malta transmitted a radio beacon, but using our radio direction finder meant making noise, radiating signals that could be detected. So we sailed on compass and mathematics, hoping our calculations were accurate, hoping the currents hadn't pushed us too far north or south. At 2300 hours, Harris picked up underwater sounds on the hydrophones. Multiple contacts, heavy machinery, diesel engines, a concentration of vessels somewhere ahead and to starboard. "What are you hearing?" I asked, moving to his station. "Not sure, sir," he admitted, adjusting his headset. "It's not movement, more like stationary engines, industrial sounds, and something else. Hammering, maybe? Metal on metal? I felt ice form in my stomach. There were only a few things that produced those sounds: dockyards, repair facilities, or, terrifyingly, minefields being laid. "Come right to 180, I ordered. "Slow to 4 knots, periscope depth." We crept forward, blind except for Harris's ears and my quick periscope looks. The sounds grew louder, clearer. Definitely mechanical work, definitely multiple vessels. And then, through the periscope in the pre-dawn darkness, I saw them. Submarines. German U-boats. 4 of them, maybe 5, clustered together with what looked like a depot ship. They were holding a station in what should have been an empty ocean, somewhere between Sicily and Malta. A secret forward base, invisible to aerial reconnaissance, allowing U-boats to refuel and rearm without returning all the way to their bases in France or Italy. And we'd sailed directly into the middle of it. "Slow astern," I whispered, knowing whispers were meaningless to the hydrophone operators on those U-boats, but unable to speak normally. "Get us out of here, quiet as church mice." The submarine backed away, electric motors barely turning, moving at a crawl. Every second felt like an hour. Any moment, one of those U-boats might start its engines, might detect us, might sound an alarm that would bring every vessel down on our heads. But we had surprise on our side. And darkness. And the simple fact that nobody expected a British submarine to be stupid enough to sail into a German submarine nest. We ghosted backward, meter by meter, until the sounds faded and Harris reported clear hydrophones. "Surface. Get us out of here at best speed on that miserable diesel." We ran south, pushing the failing engine as hard as we dared, putting distance between us and the U-boat flotilla. Dawn found us still alive, still free, and impossibly within sight of Malta's cliffs, but we weren't home yet. Malta rose from the Mediterranean like a fortress carved from honey-colored stone, her harbors bristling with anti-aircraft guns, her cliffs pocked with bomb craters from the nightly raids that had become routine. Home. Safety. Just 20 miles ahead. Then the bombers came. Aircraft. Multiple aircraft, bearing 090. I swung my binoculars east and felt my heart sink. Stukas, German dive bombers, 3 of them in formation, coming in low and fast. They'd spotted us, no question. Our wake stood out against the calm morning sea like a white arrow pointing directly at our hull. "Crash dive, get us down." For the last time, we fell into the depths. The diesel gasped and died. Electric motors took over, pulling us under as the first Stuka began its characteristic howling dive. The sound was designed to terrify, and it worked. Every man aboard knew what came next. The bomb hit the water 30 feet from where we'd been, the explosion a massive hammer blow that rang the hull like a gong. We rolled hard to port. Someone screamed. Rivets popped with sounds like gunshots. A pipe burst, spraying seawater under high pressure until Crawford threw himself on the isolation valve. 100 feet. I ordered through gritted teeth, "Level off. Damage report from all stations." The reports came back. Minor flooding in the forward torpedo room, contained. Hydraulic leak in the stern planes, manageable. Electrical short in the galley, isolated. Nothing catastrophic. Not yet. The second bomber made its run. The explosion was further away, maybe 50 feet. Still close enough to make the submarine shudder and groan. Through the hull, I could hear the third bomber circling, searching for us, trying to guess where we'd gone. "They can't see us underwater," Drummond said quietly, stating the obvious, needing to hear it said aloud. "They're guessing now." He was right. Dive bombers couldn't track submerged submarines. They had to guess our course and speed, had to estimate where we'd be and hope they got lucky. But luck ran both ways, and we only needed one piece of bad luck to end everything. The third bomb fell wide. I heard it detonate at least 100 feet away, more a deep rumble than a sharp crack. The Stukas were giving up, running low on fuel or bombs, or both. Through the periscope, I watched them turn north, heading back to Sicily. "Level off at 50 feet. Bring us around to bearing 140. Dead slow ahead. Harris, call out any contacts." We crept toward Malta like a wounded animal making for its den. Every mile took forever, every sound was a potential threat. But the miles passed, one after another, and no more aircraft appeared. No destroyers materialized from the morning haze. The war, for a few precious hours, had forgotten about us. At 1000 hours, we raised the recognition signal and began our approach to Valletta's Grand Harbor. British motor torpedo boats came out to escort us in, their crews cheering and waving as they took up position on either side. We surfaced fully, diesel silent, running on electric motors for the final approach. The harbor was packed with vessels of every description: destroyers, corvettes, minesweepers, cargo ships, and submarines. So many submarines, their dark hulls lined up along the piers like sleeping seals. The Malta submarine flotilla, Britain's most effective anti-shipping force in the Mediterranean, all crammed into one harbor because there was nowhere else to go. We tied up at our assigned pier. The moment the gangplank touched stone, McIntyre climbed off and kissed the ground, which was melodramatic even for a Glaswegian. The crew followed, dirty, exhausted, traumatized, but alive. All 31 of us. Alive. Captain Simpson, our flotilla commander, was waiting on the pier. He took one look at the upholder's battered hull, the bent periscope, the oil streaking her sides, and shook his head. "Wanklin," he said, "you look like hell." "Feel like it too, sir," I admitted. "Debriefing in 1 hour. Get your crew fed and rested." "Well done getting back." He paused, then added, more quietly, "We lost 2 boats this week, Undaunted and Urge. No survivors. 2 boats, 62 men. Gone." The Mediterranean was becoming a graveyard for submarines, German and British alike. The water was too clear, the distances too short, the enemy too numerous. We were being ground down, patrol by patrol, until there wouldn't be enough of us left to matter. "Understood, sir," I said, because what else could I say? He walked away, already focused on the next crisis. I stood on the pier, watching my crew disperse toward the mess halls and barracks, and wondered how many more patrols we had in us. How many more times could we roll the dice before they came up snake eyes? The answer came sooner than I expected. The debriefing lasted 3 hours. I described every detail: the convoy we'd tracked, the German U-boat flotilla we'd stumbled into, the damage from the bombing attack. Simpson listened without interrupting, making notes, occasionally asking pointed questions. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then, "The U-boat base you found. Can you pinpoint the location?" I marked it on his chart, my pencil creating a small X in the empty ocean between Sicily and Malta. Simpson stared at it like a man reading his own death certificate. "That's a problem," he said finally. "A significant problem. If Jerry can refuel and rearm out there, they can maintain twice as many boats on patrol. Our convoys will be torn apart. We should bomb it, sir. Send a strike from Malta." "With what aircraft?" "We have 11 operational fighters left. 11. Every plane we have is needed for defense. If we strip them for an offensive strike and the Luftwaffe hits us while they're gone." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "Then we go back," I said. "The Upholder. We can attack the depot ship, sink some of the U-boats, disrupt their operations." Simpson looked at me like I'd suggested sailing to the moon. "Your boat is held together with string and prayers, Commander. McIntyre says you need 3 weeks in the shipyard before you're operational again." "We don't have 3 weeks. We don't have 3 days. The Germans are planning something big. Intelligence suggests a major convoy headed for Tripoli in the next 48 hours. Every operational boat needs to be at sea to intercept it." "Every boat except one," I said. He understood immediately. A slow smile spread across his weathered face. "You're mad, Wanklin." "Yes, sir, runs in the family." 24 hours later, HMS Upholder put to sea again. McIntyre had performed miracles with the diesel, cannibalizing parts from 3 other boats to get both engines running. The crew, officially on leave, had volunteered to a man to return. We sailed on the evening tide, slipping out of Grand Harbor while the Luftwaffe pounded the island's airfields in their nightly ritual. The plan was simple, which meant it was probably suicidal. We'd return to the coordinates of the U-boat flotilla. We'd wait until dark. Then we'd surface in the middle of them, fire every torpedo we had at the depot ship and any U-boats within range, and run like hell for Malta before they could react. Simple. Suicidal. But if we succeeded, we'd disrupt German operations for weeks, maybe longer. And in Malta's desperate situation, weeks could mean the difference between survival and starvation. We reached the coordinates at dusk on our second day out. Submerged, moving slowly, hydrophones straining to pick up any sound. Harris, his face drawn with fatigue, pressed his headset so hard against his ears, I thought he'd damaged something. "Contact," he finally whispered. "Multiple vessels. Same location as before." "They're still here, sir." "Of course they are," I murmured. "Why would they move?" "They think they're safe." We spent the next 2 hours creeping into position, mapping out the flotilla's layout through hydrophone bearings and quick periscope glimpses. 4 U-boats, 1 large depot ship, 2 smaller. Patrol boats, probably Italian, running security circuits, all clustered together in the darkness, engines running for power, crews conducting repairs and resupply operations. At midnight, we made our move. Surface the boat. Gun action stations. Prepare all bow tubes for firing. The upholder rose from the depths one last time. The conning tower broke surface first, water streaming off the periscope and bridge, then the foredeck with its deck gun. We were loud now, diesel engines roaring. But that didn't matter. In 60 seconds, either we'd fire our torpedoes or we'd be dead. I stood on the bridge with my torpedo calculator, calling down bearing and range to Drummond at the attack periscope. The depot ship loomed ahead, brightly lit for work, completely unaware. The U-boats lay alongside like piglets at a sow's belly. "Fire 1! Fire 2! Fire 3! Fire 4!" The submarine shuddered as 4 torpedoes leaped from their tubes, compressed air propelling them into the water with massive splashes. They vanished into darkness. Mark 8 torpedoes running at 45 knots toward targets less than 1,000 yards away. "Hard right rudder, full ahead both engines. Get us out of here." The upholder turned hard, heeling over as both diesels pushed us to maximum surface speed. Behind us, alarm bells started ringing on the German ships. Searchlights stabbed across the water, searching for their attacker. Then the first torpedo hit. The depot ship's side erupted in a column of fire and water. The explosion lit up the night, a miniature sun blooming where the ship's fuel tanks had been. Secondary explosions followed as ammunition and supplies detonated. The ship began to list immediately, her spine broken. Torpedo 2 hit a U-boat directly amidships. The submarine's pressure hull couldn't withstand the blast. She broke in half and sank in seconds, taking her entire crew to the bottom before they even understood what was happening. Torpedo 3 missed, running under a U-boat and continuing into the darkness beyond. But Torpedo 4 found another U-boat, hitting her bow compartment. She began to sink slowly, her crew scrambling topside, abandoning ship. "Contact! Contact the hydrophones!" Harris's voice cracked with stress. "Multiple contacts, high speed, converging on our position. The patrol boats. Coming to hunt us. Coming for revenge. Dive, dive, dive." We went down fast, maybe too fast, the deck tilting at a dangerous angle as we flooded ballast tanks and pushed the bow under. Behind us, the ocean lit up with searchlights and tracers as the patrol boats fired at shadows. But we were already gone, already sliding into the dark water where they couldn't follow. At 200 feet, I ordered a new course, taking us southwest, away from the chaos, away from the burning ships and angry hunters. We ran silent, every man holding his breath, listening to the propeller sounds of the patrol boats crisscrossing above us, searching, searching, always searching. They never found us. We returned to Malta 3 days later, diesel engines failing again, batteries nearly dead, but alive. The entire crew is alive. Simpson met us at the pier with a bottle of whiskey and news that British intelligence had intercepted German signals, confirming the destruction of one depot ship and 2 U-boats, with another badly damaged. German submarine operations in the central Mediterranean would be curtailed for at least 6 weeks while they reorganized. "Drinks are on me," Simpson announced to the crew. "And Commander Wanklyn, His Majesty is sending you a decoration. Probably a Victoria Cross. If I know anything, you've earned it." But I was thinking about the German sailors we'd killed. The men on those U-boats who died without warning, without chance to fight back or escape. They'd been somebody's sons, somebody's brothers. They'd been doing their duty, just as we'd been doing ours, and the ocean had swallowed them all the same. The Mediterranean didn't care about nations or causes. She took everyone who sailed her waters, German or British, Italian or Maltese. She was patient and eternal, and in the end, she always won. That night, I stood on Valletta's ancient walls and watched the sunset paint the sea in shades of blood and gold. Somewhere out there, HMS Upholder would sail again, into danger, into darkness, and I would sail with her, because that was my duty, my purpose, my burden to carry, the sub that vanished beneath Malta. That's what the newspapers would eventually call us. When our luck finally ran out months later. But on that evening, with the war still raging and the future uncertain, we were just sailors trying to survive one more patrol, one more mission, one more impossible night. The Mediterranean stretched away to the horizon, beautiful and terrible, holding her secrets close. And somewhere in those depths, the ghosts of submarines past whispered warnings to the submarines still to come.